Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Infinite Ability Podcast. I am your host, Nick Yerhart, and we are here to encourage each other to find our own unique abilities. Let's go. All right. So today we have Terry Tucker, and this guy has done some incredible stuff and has also been through some challenges. So this episode is going to be very good. We're going to have a great conversation, and Terry's energy is awesome. The last time I talked to him, we just had a good time. So I'm looking forward to this one. So, Terry, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, Nick, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. Yeah, I won't go back in utero, so to speak, but I did grow up on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and was fortunate enough to be able to get a basketball scholarship to play at an NCAA Division I school called the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. Nick, I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I got that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years, helping my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then at 37, made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. But as you mentioned, I've had a few challenges since 2012. I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then just finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
That's awesome. You've done a lot of things, and congratulations to your daughter on that. That's some big accomplishments. So that's awesome. Now, when you got started in law enforcement, and especially in hostage negotiating, what was that like? Like, what are some of the key things that you learned that helped you throughout the rest of your life?
That's a great question. One of the big things I learned, they gave us this formula when I first started, when I was first on the team. And the formula was 7-38-55. And that formula had to do with how we as human beings communicate with each other. So 7% of how we communicate a message with another person are the words that we use. And think how many times in your life you'd be like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said that, or I wish I would have said that differently. That's only 7% of how that message comes across. 38% is the tone of voice that we use with that message. Are we really excited and really can't wait to get that out? Or are we kind of calm and laid back and reserved? So 38% is the tone of voice you use with the words. And then 55%, so more than half of how we communicate a message, is our body language and our facial expressions. And we were given that formula because as hostage negotiators, if somebody was barricaded with a gun in a room, I was not in the room with that person. That would not have been safe. So what they wanted us to realize that we didn't have that 55%. I couldn't say something to somebody I was negotiating with and see them kind of, roll their eyes and, say to themselves, oh, what an idiot Terry is. I can't believe he said that to me. So we had to get good at certainly basing things on what people said to us, but also what they didn't say and how they say it. And I'll end with this. One of the most important things they taught us was to use tactical empathy. Because, Nick, sometimes we'd get on the scene and have no idea why we were there, what precipitated this, what started this. And so we would basically start with, help me to understand where you're coming from or where you're at. Again, the important word there is understand. If you were a homicide suspect that just murdered 3 people, I wasn't going to say I agreed with you, but understanding leads to trust, and trust leads to a point where hopefully I can get you out safely.
Yeah. And a big thing with communicating with anyone is it's always better to agree. It doesn't mean that they're right, but always agree. This is a big thing in sales when you're dealing with, you know, potential clients or customers. If you start to disagree, people kind of go back and they don't move further with you. So by what you did, as a hostage negotiator, you were allowing the communication to continue and for them to build trust in you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an important, that trust part is incredibly important, because if I don't trust you, if you don't trust me, even if it's not a hostage situation, even if it's a friend situation, or as you mentioned, a sales situation, if we don't trust each other, if I think you're trying to get over on me, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I always remember they used to tell us that in hostage negotiation, a yes without a how is a no. And I think that's true in business. I think that's true in sales. If somebody just says yes to you, I know I've done this. You get those robocalls that, they want to come out and look at your roof. And sometimes you just say yes to get rid of them. But if that yes doesn't have a how, if that yes doesn't have some way that we're going to move this forward, we're going to keep this going, then that yes is really a no.
I definitely agree with that. I've done the same thing. I say yes just to get it over with, but don't take any action afterwards to make it go any further. So yeah, that's a good point. And then you started a uh, security firm for schools. Is that right? What was that like when you started that and first got into your own business?
I mean, it was certainly something I'd never done before in my life. So, having my own business, being responsible for making the money, doing the advertising, writing the copy, doing the actual assessments was, I was figuring my way out through it. I didn't have all the answers. I love the story. Jesse Itzler is a part owner of the Atlanta Hawks. He's a fairly impressive entrepreneur. He's married to a woman by the name of Sarah Blakely. And Sarah Blakely started a women's undergarment company called Spanx.
Oh yeah,
It's a
I know who that is.
Yeah, I mean
Yep.
it's everybody knows who Spanx is at this point in time. But he tells the story that when she started that business, she had one prototype and $5,000. That's it. And she had been a door-to-door facsimile, fax salesperson. Nick, we don't even use faxes anymore for the most
No,
part. It's not
no, we
something
don't.
that's even around. And his point was that if she would have waited until she understood, the human resources, the marketing, the manufacturing, the distribution part of that business, he said, I guarantee you somebody else would have come up with that idea and run with it. And that's kind of the way I felt in my own business. It's like, I have certain knowledge, experience, skills that I can bring to these schools, but I don't have all this stuff figured out. The point is, wherever you are, just start. Just jump in with both feet and figure it out as you go along. If you need to hire a lawyer, hire a lawyer. If you need to hire marketing expertise, hire marketing expertise. But don't let the things you can't do stop you from starting something that you want to do.
Yeah, one of my mentors, he says, just F it up and figure it out. Because if you do something and you mess it up, well, now you learn for next time. So now you can do better next time. And I do it all the time. I'll do something, I'll be like, well, that was a bad idea. Let's do it again, but change this part of it. So yeah, in,
It's the
in,
learning.
yeah, in business, it's better just to take action because if you don't take action, guess what? You're not doing anything, so you're not going to get any further ahead. A lot of us entrepreneurs, I was guilty of this myself. We think we need to learn it all before we start. So, I mean, I spent the first 2 years of my business basically focused on learning and I'm not doing what I was learning. If you don't practice the things that you learn, it doesn't stick. So I, I pretty much wasted like a year because it was just I wasn't taking action. So now I'm taking that action and things are going a whole lot better than they were before. So yeah.
That's good.
Mhm. Yeah. And then what are you working on these days?
So I have my blog, my website, and I'm working on a second book. I wrote a book back in 2020, actually while I was healing from my leg amputation due to my cancer, and it was a book about success. It was a book about how I felt people could be successful. And Nick, even after I published that book, I kind of felt there was another book in me that, and it was also about another word that began with the letter S, and that word was significance. Success is what we do for us, for ourselves. Significance is what we do to help or make a difference in other people's lives. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you can be both. I think you can be successful and significant at the same time. But I always kind of felt that there was something sort of tugging at me that you need to write this second book. Now, granted, it's been almost 5 years since I wrote that book. So it was time for me to do that. So I've spent probably the last year and a few months working on a second book called Four Truths and a Lie.
Okay. And then what was the name of the first book?
First book was called Sustainable Excellence 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life.
Okay, I'm assuming all the listeners can go to Amazon and get that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple
Okay.
iBooks, wherever you can get a book online, you can get Sustainable Excellence.
And then what is your website?
The website is motivationalcheck.com.
Awesome. I always want to make sure that people can reach out to you and check out what you do. So awesome. Now, you went through cancer. You had your leg amputated. Can you talk more on that and some of the challenges that you faced?
Sure. So 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And initially didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood. Nothing gave either one of us concern. Fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it examined. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call from him that really turns my life upside down. And as I mentioned, he was a friend. And so the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened, the more scared I was becoming. Until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun. It affects the melon, the pigment in our skin, and has nothing to do with sun exposure. It's a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hands. And because my cancer was so uncommon, he recommended that I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center, probably one of the best cancer hospitals in the country, and be treated. And so I did. I had the tumor removed on the bottom of my foot, all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And then, Nick, they told me, well, you'll probably be dead in 2 years. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And obviously, it'll be 13 years in April since I was diagnosed. I am still here, fortunately, through the grace of medical science and the development for melanoma. I was on a drug for 5 years that gave me terrible flu-like symptoms every week. I had my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2019, and I still have tumors in my lungs, which I found out about when I had my leg amputated, and that I'm still treated for every 3 weeks at the hospital. And so it's been an ongoing saga, but I've learned that you need to find meaning in your misery. That
Uh-huh.
there's a reason that this is happening. Now, I've had all 88 genes that doctors either know of or suspect cause every single form of cancer that we know about. I've had all 88 of those genes tested, and I have no mutations in any of my genes that would predispose me to any type of cancer, which certainly begs the question, why did I get this incredibly rare form of cancer? Nobody's been able to answer that for me. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about why I got it. I
Uh-huh.
have it. I'm just trying to find the meaning in that misery.
Your attitude on this is a lot different than most people when they have cancer. So that says a lot about you as a person and your mindset. You're choosing to look at, okay, yes, I have this situation, but what can I do with it? How can I make this a positive thing? So, you're getting out there, you're writing books, you're helping people, and, I think you realize your purpose in life, and when you have that purpose, it makes it a lot easier to keep fighting no matter what is going on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do. And I think, Nick, so many people never even search for their purpose, let alone find it and live it. And I remember there's an entrepreneur by the name of Ed Milet. In the
It's
23 he was
awesome.
voted, entrepreneur of the year. But I heard him talk about the four types of people that are in the world. And when I first heard him, I was like, all right, I gotta think about this. I gotta see if this is really something that I believe in, that I think is true as well, based on my experiences in life. And the first group he talks about are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people that you will encounter in your life. The second group he talks about are the motivated. And he talks about that in terms of a sort of carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. He says it's kind of low level, but it works for a lot of people to have a very happy and successful life. The third group he talks about are the inspirational people. The word inspiration coming from two words, in spirit. So if you're an inspirational person, you are moving people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes if I'm giving a talk, depending on the group, depending on how much fun we're having, I'll tell that story and they'll be like, all right, show of hands. How many people are unmotivated? And nobody raises their hand. Nobody ever says, hey, I'm unmotivated in my life. But if you believe Milet, that's the vast majority of us that exist in the world. I would love to be an aspirational person someday, but
Hmm.
it's finding that purpose and then living it that I think starts you on that road to getting to that.
I agree with that 100%. And I've never heard that from him. That's really good because, like, right now where I'm at in my life, I'm an inspiration. I hear it all the time. I would love to be an aspirational person to people at some point down the road. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I like that. Actually, I will be that person.
You will. I have no doubt about
Let's
that.
not say I want. I will.
You will.
Let's attract it into our life.
Exactly.
I totally believe in the law of attraction. I've seen it firsthand many times. It's real. Like, so it's always important to stay positive, control your mind, have a good mindset, have a growth mindset, and know what you want. I there's so many people out there that don't have a goal in life, any goals. They just live, more work, and that's it. And I hope to help people understand that it's okay to have goals because a lot of people think it's like selfish to have big goals. No, it's not. Have goals for yourself and take anybody who wants to come along the ride with you on your journey. And that's what I'm doing for myself and everybody around me.
think that's incredibly important. And I always believe, and if the people listening to us today remember nothing else that we talk about today, I hope they'll remember this. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want to see you succeed and hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
Exactly, because you are the average of the 5 people you hang around. So make sure your closest 5 are people that you want to be like. And you're gonna grow out of people in your life. That's just life. Doesn't mean that you won't have a connection, but like for me, I don't hang out with my friends like I used to. It's nothing against them. It's just I'm working on myself and my business, and I can't, go hang out at their house every weekend for, 2 days in a row. That's not who I am anymore. And they're okay with it. They understand. As long as you explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing it. Tell your people your goals. Actually, if you tell the people around you your goals, you're gonna know who's gonna stick around and who's not right away. Cause
And you know who's going to help you try to get to
yep,
those goals, and those are the people you're right. Those are the people you should surround yourself with, not the people that, either don't care or, have so much drama in their life that they're not even looking at their goals and things like that. Yeah.
I cut out everybody with drama, except for my one good buddy. He's he's like he likes drama, but then again, it's just like his little thing. It's like so when he comes over, he'll start telling a story, and I'm like, dude, drama. I don't want that in my head. Okay. So he respects it, but it's kind of funny. And sometimes I listen, but yeah, I don't like drama. I just want to do my thing and focus on positive. Because usually drama is not positive stuff. So.
No, it's not. Those are the people that it's all about me, focus on me and things like that.
Hmm.
Nick, I mean, I'm much older than you and that, and I've seen in my life so many people that feel that like they're born empty. And that when they get out of school, whatever that is for them, and get into life, however that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill up their empty self. I've got to make the most money. I've got to, drive the nicest car, live in the nicest house, and have the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is we're not born empty. We're all born full with whatever we need to be successful, however you define that word, already inside of us. And if we can just find that, take it out, use it for our benefit, all of a sudden now, it's not about what I can get, it's about what I can give. And so our job in life should not be to fill our empty self up. Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, and of our communities. And I think when you make that paradigm shift in your mind, all of a sudden life takes on an entirely.
If you enjoyed this show, please go ahead and share it on your Instagram story and tag me in the Nick Yerhart. Also, go ahead and share it anywhere else that you see fit, because the only way that I can grow this is by you guys sharing it. I don't sell anything on here. I don't have any sponsors, so let's just get it out there by word of mouth and help more people. Alright, everyone, remember, your abilities are infinite.
Different meaning.
I would agree with it. I had never heard it put like that, so thank you for sharing that, because I'm going to take that and implement that into my own self. Empty out and in a good way to others to, create the life that I want and help the people around me. So yeah, thank you. All right, well, we're getting close to the end here, and I would love to know. So, my slogan is "Your abilities are infinite." What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think we've all been given unique gifts and talents, and we've all been given a purpose on this world to use those gifts and talents. So I would say we may be, we all have unique gifts and talents, but we have an infinite possibility of using those gifts and talents. Like I said, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our family, our friends, and our communities. And there's that old saying about you can't change the world. And you really can't change the world, but you can change your little piece of whatever world that you're in. So I would say use your unique gifts and talents in whatever possibility, whatever infinite possibility you can to make the lives of other human beings.
I agree with you. I love that, and that's what I'm doing.
Sure.
Using my unique abilities to make the change in my world. I like that. And then for our listeners, do you have any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I'm a voracious reader. I love to read. It helps me. One of the things that we were taught as hostage negotiators was always be curious, and so I really enjoy reading. And one of the books that I love to read, and I've read it several times, starting in high school, was a book called Farewell to Arms, written by Ernest Hemingway, one of our most prolific writers. And there's a line in that book, and Farewell to Arms is kind of a semi-autobiographical book about Hemingway's time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army, even though he was an American, during the First World War. And there's a line in that book that I love, and the line is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. And I think that's such a metaphor for life. Just like if you were to break your arm and, a doctor would set it, put it in a cast, and it would heal, it would be stronger at that area where it was broken. The same thing in life. Whatever difficulties, adversities that we go through in life, if you can keep moving forward, more than likely you're going to come out the other end of that a stronger and more resilient individual.
That is so true, and I know from my own life that's happened many times where you're going through a really difficult time and you're thinking, how in the world am I going to get through this? And then you do, and you're stronger for the next thing that happens. Because guess what, folks? Bad stuff happens all the time in life. It's normal. Get used to it. So,
You're
but
absolutely right.
by by getting through the hard situations, and I always look to look back on them and analyze everything that happened. And I gotta try every time that something bad happens. It's like I'm obsessed with finding the positive thing that came out of it, and I always find it. Always. I mean, just to give a short little example, in 2019, I lost my dad to brain cancer. He was only 44 years old. At that time, my whole life turned around. He owned a business. We sold that around the same time, so everything just changed. And I was like, what in the world am I gonna do? I don't have a job. I lost my number one mentor, my hero, the guy that was always there for me no matter what. He was the second contact in my phone under my mom. Like mom's always first. Gotta give her that.
That's all right.
But dad was always the one that I called when I needed help or anything. He was always there. So when I lost him, that was the worst moment in my life. And I was like, there's no good thing that's going to come out of this. No, there's no good reason for this to happen. Fast forward a year or two down the road, I got involved in self-development. I went through a time where I was very depressed. I was not doing well, and got involved in this, and I ended up getting my own coach to help me through things. And that's how I figured out my purpose in life, is to spread my message, inspire others, and use the gifts that I have to help as many people as I can. Now, if that were to happen, or if I were to lost my dad, I would not be on the path I'm on now. So literally, everything has a good outcome. You might not see it for a while, but I guarantee you, it's always there.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I don't share it very often. So, but all right, Terry, this has been really great. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Of course. This episode of the Infinite Abilities podcast is brought to you by the one and only Infinite Toolbox, where just like all other toolboxes, we will get the job done, guaranteed. Whether you're an entrepreneur looking to save time, boost revenue, or automate your processes, Infinite Toolbox has got you covered. With powerful tools designed to drive leads, expand your reach, and gain your industry secrets, we help you work smarter, not harder. Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Visit us at infinitetoolbox.com. That's infinitetoolbox.com, and discover how infinite your potential really is.